They say you never forget the moment. Your heart shatters when the person you trusted most looks at you like you're nothing. For me, it happened under the bright, fake lights of a crowded steakhouse, with the clinking of glasses and polite laughter swirling around us. My husband, the man who once held me like I was fragile glass, leaned back in his chair, grinned at his father, and tore me down with a single cruel joke. They laughed together while I sat there, swallowing my humiliation with my wine. Hi host! I've been following your channel for a while now, and honestly, your videos have given me the strength I didn't know I needed. After everything that happened, I finally found the courage to reach out and tell my story. My name is Jessica. I'm a 34-year-old mom of 2 boys, and up until a few months ago, I thought I had a picture-perfect life. We lived in a nice neighborhood. My husband, David, had a good job. We had friends, weekend barbecues, family dinners, the whole thing. I stayed at home with the kids, pouring my life into being a good wife and mother. And for years, I believed we were happy. Or maybe I just believed what I wanted to believe. That night was supposed to be a celebration. David had just closed a big deal at work, and he wanted his parents to join us for dinner. I spent hours getting ready, picking the right dress, making sure the kids were with a sitter, practicing my polite small talk, because his father could be difficult. I wanted everything to be perfect for him. I never expected that the man I loved would be the one to strip me down with his words, that he would make a joke at my expense, call me just a housewife who spends all day watching TV, and laugh while his father slapped him on the back in approval. The worst part? He didn't even see me flinch. He just kept laughing. That was the moment something inside me cracked, and the woman who sat there smiling politely died a quiet death. The woman who stood up from that table, who would soon vanish with her children and leave him begging for forgiveness. She was someone he had created, and she wasn't going to be silent anymore. I sat there, trying to swallow the lump in my throat, the air thick with laughter and polite conversation. I was suffocating. I wanted to scream, to stand up and demand respect, but instead, I smiled. I smiled because that's what I'd always done. I was the perfect wife, the supportive mother, the woman who never made waves. But tonight, David had crossed a line I could never ignore again. Jessica, honey, you look beautiful tonight. Too bad you don't spend more time keeping up with yourself, David said with a casual smile, his voice dripping with sarcasm. I forced a smile, but inside, I felt the sharp sting of his words. I'd spent an hour getting ready for this dinner, making sure everything was perfect. And there he was, my husband, tearing me down in front of his father as if I were some kind of joke. The silence in my chest was deafening. I wanted to look at him and demand an apology. Instead, I just nodded, holding my fork in a trembling hand. His father, Charles, chimed in, his voice booming across the table. You know, David, your mother always said she'd never let you marry a woman who didn't know how to properly take care of herself. Guess she was right, huh? The words hit me like a slap across my face. David's mother had passed years ago, but her voice was alive in his every criticism, every word of mockery he uttered. And there they were, father and son, laughing together as if they were sharing some private joke at my expense. The tears threatened to rise, but I fought them back. I had learned over the years to hide my emotions from him, to protect myself from his cruel jabs. But tonight it felt different. His words weren't just hurtful. They were a death sentence for something I'd spent years trying to preserve. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I could barely hear their voices over the pounding in my head. I looked at David across the table, watching the smug look on his face as he smiled and joked with his father. He didn't see me. He didn't see the woman he'd crushed beneath his laughter. And for the first time in a long while, I realized I was done. When the dinner ended, I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. I simply stood, grabbed my purse, and walked out the door. I didn't know where I was going at first. I just needed to get out of there. The drive home felt like a haze, my fingers gripping the steering wheel, as if it were the only thing keeping me grounded. My mind was racing, but my heart was numb. The events of the evening kept playing in my head, looping like an endless reel. His mocking words, his father's laughter, the way I felt invisible. But the worst part, the absolute worst part, was the realization that this wasn't the first time. This wasn't the first time he'd made me feel small, unimportant, worthless. I'd just been too blind to see it, too naive to acknowledge that our perfect life had been built on a foundation of silence and submission. I had convinced myself for so long that he loved me, that he cared. But that man sitting across the table from me was not the person I married. He wasn't the man I once trusted with everything. He was someone who saw me as a prop in his perfect life. Someone to stand beside him and smile while he made fun of me in front of his family. The pain I felt in that moment was overwhelming. But something else was creeping in, a cold, hard anger. It had been building for years under the surface, slowly creeping through the cracks of my self-respect. But tonight, it all came rushing to the surface. I had given him everything. My trust, my love, my loyalty. And in return, he treated me like a joke. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I knew what I had to do. I didn't care anymore. I was done waiting for him to realize what he'd lost. He wasn't going to change. I slipped inside the house quietly, the kids still asleep in their rooms. I walked straight to the bedroom and began packing a bag. It felt surreal, like I was on autopilot. But at the same time, there was an undeniable clarity. I was no longer the woman who let her husband humiliate her. I was no longer the woman who stayed silent in the face of cruelty. I took my phone out, typed a message, and pressed send. "David, I'm taking the kids and leaving. Don't try to find us. We're done." I didn't care about the consequences anymore. I didn't care if he begged, or pleaded, or tried to make me feel guilty. I was leaving. And I wasn't coming back. I don't know what I expected when I packed our bags. Maybe some part of me thought I'd feel relief the moment I walked out the door. But I didn't. Instead, the weight of everything hit me all at once, making it hard to breathe. The house that had once felt like home now felt like a prison. A place where love had turned into contempt, and trust had crumbled into nothingness. The kids were still asleep. I moved quietly around their rooms, gathering the essentials. The house was silent, as if it were holding its breath, waiting for me to make a move. I kissed each of them softly on the forehead as I packed their things, trying to leave behind any trace of the chaos that had consumed my heart. They were innocent, caught in the crossfire of a war they didn't even know existed. But they would know, soon enough. They'd know what it meant to stand up for yourself, to walk away from something toxic. They'd learn that their mother was strong enough to leave, strong enough to survive. As I zipped up the last bag, my heart raced. Was this really happening? Was I really going to walk away from everything I'd known? From the life I had worked so hard to build? I didn't have time to second-guess myself. I couldn't. I had made my decision, and there was no turning back. I grabbed my phone and sent one final message to David. It was short, simple, and to the point. "I'm gone. Don't try to contact me. I'm taking the kids, and we're starting over. Goodbye." The words felt freeing, like I had finally cut the last thread holding me to a past I no longer wanted. I gathered the kids, one by one, as they stirred in their beds. "Mom? What's going on?" My oldest, Ethan, asked with a sleep-heavy voice. His eyes were still blurry with the remnants of dreams. "We're going on a trip, sweetheart. Just the three of us," I said, trying to sound calm, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. I didn't want to scare them. I wanted them to feel safe, to know that everything was going to be okay, even if I wasn't sure of that myself. I left a note for David on the kitchen counter. It wasn't a long message, just enough to let him know I wasn't coming back, that I was done. I got in the van, buckled the kids into their seats, and started the engine. The hum of the motor was the only sound as I drove away from the life I had known, away from the man who had humiliated me, who had shattered my trust. And as I drove further down the road, I felt a sense of freedom, not just from him, but from the person I had been. I was free, and there was no going back. It didn't take long for David to realize I was gone. He probably woke up that morning expecting to find me in the kitchen, preparing breakfast, like I always had. But when he walked into the empty house, the silence must have hit him like a slap across the face. He didn't know where we'd gone. He didn't know why I left. And for the first time in our marriage, he was powerless to do anything about it. I could almost hear him pacing, his voice rising in panic as he called me over and over again. My phone buzzed with his frantic messages, his words full of confusion and desperation. "Where are you? What's going on? Come home. We can fix this. I'm sorry. Please." But I didn't respond. I couldn't. Not yet. I knew what would happen if I gave in. If I answered, I'd be pulled back into the same cycle. The same lies, the same humiliation. I couldn't afford to be weak anymore. David didn't understand what he had done. He didn't see the years of hurt, the slow erosion of everything we once had. He didn't see the woman who sat silently at dinner while he mocked her. He didn't see the pain in my eyes, the betrayal in my heart. But now he was desperate, and that desperation made him dangerous. He started calling our mutual friends, asking if they had heard from me. He reached out to my family, asking them to talk some sense into me. He even called my parents, playing the victim, begging them to tell me to come home. It didn't matter that I had told him exactly how I felt. It didn't matter that I had left to protect myself. He wasn't seeing the truth. He was only seeing the wife he had lost, the one he never truly valued until she was gone. Days passed. His messages got more frantic, his tone more pleading. At night, I would lie awake, hearing the hum of my phone beside me, and I would wonder, would he ever truly understand the weight of what he had done? Would he ever realize how deep the wound ran? But the real question that kept me awake was this: would he ever change? Or was he just another man who would beg for forgiveness when it was too late? Was I strong enough to leave behind a man I had once loved? To walk away from the life I had built, knowing I might never get the answers I needed? And as I looked at my children, sleeping peacefully in the back of the van, I asked myself, was I doing the right thing? Was leaving the only way to show them what it means to stand up for yourself, to demand respect? Or was I breaking something that couldn't be fixed? I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done letting my silence speak for me. I wasn't going back to that life. Not ever again.